Okay, here we go. Propaganda. I saved this one for last because it has so many elements of the other categories of quote unquote fake news. And remember, we're using the term fake news very loosely here, and all of these labels for all of these categories are very loose. And you're going to see just how much in common they all have as we go forward. You're either with us or against us. This statement illustrates the zero-sum thinking of propaganda. Propaganda wants you to think that there is only one correct way to approach an issue or situation, and that if you are on the wrong side, you're a bad person. Propaganda is intended to change how a person thinks and feels about an issue or a category of people. Advocacy also does this, but advocacy is usually intended to clear up misunderstandings or to advocate for people rather than against people. Propaganda is also more likely to use falsehoods or trickery. All of the advice up to this point, from satire to scams, applies to propaganda. At the risk of being repetitive, as I said, the categories that I'm using in this presentation are very fluid and they all share a lot of common traits. So here's some similarities between propaganda and other quote unquote fake news. Propaganda will often engage in sensationalist language and irony, like satire. Like rumors, propaganda is often thin on details, letting the audience fill in the blanks with their own assumptions. Like conspiracy theories, propagandists will often attack anything that contradicts their narrative as evidence of an effort to undermine the people and causes they claim to support. Propaganda in conflict. You'll often find, almost always find propaganda in wars or times of deep social conflict, uh, because this is when people are looking for support from potential allies. Um, in these kinds of situations, they will rely even more heavily on exaggeration, omission, and even outright falsehoods. Belligerents will showcase their greatest achievements, downplay or ignore their setbacks, deny any wrongdoing, and place a special emphasis on the worst excesses of their opponents. That doesn't necessarily mean that both sides are equally at fault, but they are highly motivated to show each other as being the worst that they could possibly be, and showing themselves as being the most morally righteous side. The truth matters, especially if we don't like someone. It's often tempting to simply assume that something that sounds like something a group or individual we find unpleasant would say is true. Our instincts will tell us they must be guilty of something. Recall advice from other sections of this presentation. Be open to new information. Being unfair damages our credibility and adds to climates of anger and distrust. Now, there is an exception here, which is that if you are in a situation where you feel physically unsafe or you're experiencing emotional abuse, then just get out of that situation. When in doubt, go to the source. The text of laws, bills, executive orders, ordinances, and other government documents are almost always accessible through official government websites. While some of the writing of government documents is often technical, reviewing the original text will allow you to ensure that sources debating it are using the correct wording. Did they really say that? This is something that you really ought to ask yourself more often. Remember, avoid reflexive sharing just because it sounds like something they would say. Most public officials maintain a website, a press office, and a social media presence. A visit to their page or official website can often help you verify if someone really said something and what the original context was.